Welcome to the Queen Divas, Queens of Fitness podcast. Join your hosts, three-time WBFF world champions and WBFF royalty, Alicia Gowans and Stephanie Ayala McHugh, as we explore all things female health, training, competing, mindset, and living the fitness life every day.
All right, so we're tuning in for our next episode of Queen Divas podcast with my beautiful co-host, Stephanie Ayala McHugh.
Hello, everyone.
And we're discussing all things sleep.
Sleep is my favorite. That's my favorite.
How's your sleep been going now that you're coming in only so many sleeps to stage?
Oh, man. You know, it's actually only like 50 sleeps to stage. Can you believe that?
That's crazy. Oh, my
50.
God.
It's 50. I'm still just kind of mind blown thinking about that. You know, it's 7 weeks technically, you know, it's thinking of it in weeks forms. It is starting to creep up. I think with sleep, it's one of the most important things that so many people neglect. And with sleep being one of the biggest tools, not just for, you know, physical, you know, changes, as well as like cognitive function, you know, and obviously trying to get your metabolism and all of your healthy bodily functions, you know, flowing. It's more about really trying to prioritize it, in my opinion. So many people neglect it and put it on the back burner. And for me, it's a priority during prep. So to answer your question, I am sleeping so good because I'm training hard. I am training so hard that it just it knocks me out. And it does exactly that, to where I'm sleeping very, very deep. Of course, it's going to start probably changing as I start getting a little closer from just being anxious and starting to get a little more of the, you know, anxiety of trying to I think that's normal for any competitor too. So
hey, let me ask you this, because I bet you get thrown this from people. I get to the end and I get so scared of going to bed hungry that I'm more awake.
It's so true. I think that's one of the things that we need to battle with our meal timing. I think that also is something that we need to make sure that we actually have timed correctly, because if you are going to sleep later than when your last meal actually was, then you are going to be dealing with this a lot more. If you're not hitting your water intake enough sufficiently, you are definitely going to be feeling very empty. The fluids fill up your gut and you really feel so much more satisfied, even though you're not necessarily satisfying your hunger. You do at least get to manage some of these cues. How many times have you woken up in the middle of the night, Ali, and just slammed some water because you're hungry?
Oh my God. You know? Yeah. Or been peeing all night long because I've slammed so much water before bed to stop the hunger. All of the above. So, you know, look, what I find super interesting is the fact that based on stats, the average human adult sleeps less than 7 hours a night, like chronically sleep deprived, right? And I was one of them. So I'm going to raise that stat because I'll put my hand up and be like, I was this naughty individual where I was like, sleep when I'm dead, all of the things, all at once, YOLO. Like that was my attitude right up until dead set.
You were the team no sleep. You were team no sleep.
I was so bad though, babe. When I was in corporate, I was really bad. Like I was known for literally having on average 4 hours, maybe if I was lucky, if I was sleeping in, it was a 6 hour night, right? Like that's crazy to me now. Now I'm like, what was I thinking?
But how many people relate to that? I know so many of my clients, that's what they tell me when if I do a launch call for any client, then they tell me their sleep schedule. I look at them so crazy and I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, you go to sleep at 12 and you wake up at 4. So you're sleeping 4 hours every night and you do this to yourself and you say this is the only way to live and you wonder why you're not losing weight and why you feel crazy and why your mood swings are high or why your maybe cycle isn't on point, you know, obviously all these things really downregulate and it sends a very big down spiral for so many other things that, you know, our cortisol levels, our circadian rhythm really just gets fucked up.
It really does. It really does. And look, you know, for me, I got to the point where I was high functioning on that low sleep, right? But what I just didn't have respect for was the actual physiological ramifications, right? So the actual impact of the loss of certain phases of sleep on my function, on my biology, on my longevity of life, on my hormonal balance, like on so many factors, right? When you think about it, right, our entire lifetime, we spend 1/3 of it asleep. So if we live for 100 years, imagine that. That's a fairly decent chunk of, like, you wouldn't be like, oh yeah, 30 years I'm asleep for. But effectively we are. Like, it's crazy, right? But that's facts. And we do. So, you know, it's essential for our mental well-being. It's essential for our physical. And you hit the nail on the head. It really does. It's actually our third pillar of health. So if you're not focused on sleep, you are limiting your body's ability to, you know, be efficiently producing, its, you know, natural biochemistry and its natural functions and its physiology for reproduction and recovery, like everything. So it's quite fascinating when we look at the stages of sleep, right? So what are the actual stages and where do we spend most of our time? Now, I'm just going to jump straight to the last one and say this. When I was living on those retardo levels of sleep, I was missing most of my deep sleep, which the biggest bang for buck is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., right? I was cutting that in half straight away. If I wasn't going to bed until like 12, sometimes 1 or 2 a.m., but then getting up at like 4 a.m., I'm also missing all this REM. So there's two parts of this that is really important for the deep restorative recovery, but then also REM is really important for the flushing of the toxins in the brain and the neural rewiring, and that's good for cognitive function. So there are so many elements that I was missing out, and everyone listening to this will have that can relate to my old history. You're going to relate to the fact that you're just never quite feeling fresh. You start losing track of things. You lose, memory goes, like just little things start to go by the wayside. And, you think that it's just prep or it's just this or it's just stress, but it's really not. It also limits your ability to handle stress. Like you really can't function normally without it. And it's really quite interesting once you start to understand the true impact of it. Steph, tell me, when you talk to clients, right, what's probably the biggest thing that comes up with sleep, and what's the biggest thing that you identify that people don't know about sleep? Because we'll start breaking down the stages soon, but if we just look at this from a client perspective, what do we face most? Because mine is just generally people don't ever respect sleep and its imperative.
Oh, they don't prioritize it. Kind of like how I started, today's podcast, is that most people put sleep on at the back burner. They don't prioritize it. So it's like the last thing. So it's kind of like that missing gap, right? Like we try to schedule ourselves and put so much on our plate, whether if that's with your kids or with work, with prep or whatever you're doing, you like fill up your whole day. You're thinking you have, from like 5 a.m. till 10 p.m. or till midnight, like with some people with the crazies like you or your old you, that
my old me
to do the 4 to 5 hour sleep every night.
Crazy.
And your body adapts to it. And to kind of touch base on what you were saying, Ali, your body, you get used to it. Like you said, you adapt. Like, your body is an animal. It's supposed to adapt to any stress that you bring to it, any level that you bring to it, it's going to adapt to that. So, but then it starts also fatiguing and it starts catching up to you when you do this for a long period of time.
My God, yes.
Started mentioning those symptoms that you start getting the fogginess, you can't really function correctly. You can't really manage stress. You start actually being scatterbrained, and you wonder why you're not. You're in the gym working so hard. I think one of the individuals that to me it frustrates me as a coach is normally when they lack sleep because they decide to just wake up to go to the gym and then lift. I'm like, look. Sleeping is actually going to build muscle. If you do not sleep, you are not going to grow. So that's actually one of the first things that most clients don't realize and don't know is the fact that sleep is going to lead to muscle growth. So if you're really depriving yourself and lacking sleep, you're in the gym putting 2-3 hours, let's say like this ridiculous amount of time, shave off the amount of time you're training and actually put a little more effort into sleep. Sleep more. I mean it. Like if you can actually get into that deep REM sleep that you're talking about, you're really going to grow. And I think that's one of my biggest tools when people ask me, why have you been successful or how are you successful? I'm like, I prioritize sleep, whether I'm not a napper. I think a lot of people can, tend to nap throughout the day and catch up on sleep that way. All power to you. I think the individuals that could do it have like a superpower, like you could just kind of like tell yourself to go to bed. I'm like, I don't have that. I do have a circadian rhythm. And just to explain what the circadian rhythm is for all you listeners, it's technically it picks up when you wake up and when you go to sleep. And normally you get woken up by the sunlight, like the sunlight, once the sun is out, your circadian rhythm starts trying to get you to release, obviously some of your endorphins. You actually start waking up, feel more awake throughout the middle of the day. You're going to notice it rise. Your cortisol level naturally rises through natural work stress, life stress, working out naturally raises your cortisol levels. And as you peak throughout the day, you're going to start dropping these levels, the cortisol levels, to allow melatonin to release in the evening. And if you're messing up these levels from actually down regulating, saying you actually have cortisol so much higher throughout the day due to like maybe life circumstances and stress, or too much caffeine. Oh my God. One of the biggest things that rise your cortisol levels that, actually suppress your sleep and make you feel like you can't go to sleep. That's actually one of the things I get told a lot. 70, I can't sleep. Like I'm having issues sleeping. Like I want to sleep, but I'm having issues actually staying asleep or falling asleep, and I think that's always going to come down to actually your cortisol levels affecting obviously your sleep rhythm, which is your sleep schedule. Your sleep wake schedule is your circadian rhythm. So if you're messing that up, or you don't even have a sleep time, if you're just letting yourself kind of like fall asleep or go to sleep whenever, you're really not paying attention to when your body naturally releases your melatonin. So if you don't pay attention to these things or have trouble, you should start supplementing in to help with cortisol management. Like for example, for me, I used to actually struggle going to sleep, but again, I prioritize sleep, but I still struggled with going to sleep and sometimes staying asleep. And that was actually me having too high of stress and too much cortisol being risen. So ashwagandha was one of my biggest tools that I started taking, and it helps so much, as well as like a supplement called Calm. Calm actually is by Revive, and it really does just what the word says, calms you down, and it has where the abilities where your nervous system calms down. Obviously your B12 is helping the nervous system, as well as your cortisol levels dropping allows you to go to sleep, and I sleep like a baby. Honestly, those two alone have been like magic tools for myself to just stay asleep, go to sleep, and wake up literally like with everything ready to roll, and I don't feel groggy. I'm not taking a sleeping aid. It's not that's going to cause me to rely on a supplement to go to sleep. It just makes sure that my stress levels are, at a regulated amount. So I don't have to stay awake because you feel that anxiety, or if you deal with maybe anxiousness or overthinking by the end of the day because of all your stress, you're having a little cortisol issues that are starting to lead into negative effects for your sleep. But going into you, Ali, like for your changes of lifestyle, what would you say? So what was demanded?
They were huge.
That it was different, right? You had so much on your, well, I'm not saying you don't have a lot on your plate now, but it's different in scheduling. So what was demanded then?
So what I actually did was I set aside time to actually implement a very strict sleep routine. So I worked on my sleep hygiene. I did not have anything that was specific in play whatsoever. So I'm talking like I'd work, I'd go home, I'd eat, and then I'd work some more. And then when I would finally feel tired at my computer, I'd go to bed. And then like you, latency was a problem. And latency, AKA time it takes from when you lay down to fall asleep, anything longer than 10 minutes means you're actually overtired, chronically tired, requiring sleep. Anything less than a couple of minutes is that you are also chronically tired, overtired. So it's this like, sort of beautiful window between 2 and 10 minutes. You should be naturally falling asleep, and it means you're not too far gone either side. And I was either falling in bed, passing out straight away, so chronically overtired, or I was falling asleep like sometimes 45 minutes to an hour laying in bed before I fall asleep. Like it was terrible. So the first thing I did was I actually addressed my blue light exposure. I got the hell off of my computer. So where I would sit on the computer until 11, 12 o'clock at night, I removed it. I stopped. From 6 o'clock onwards, no more computer time. I did family time, then I did unwind time. I put on blue light glasses, blocking light glasses. I'd use the blue light screen on my laptop. I also use the blue light screen on my phone, and my phone actually now disconnects from all apps after 6 p.m. So it actually disconnects, doesn't allow me to have connectivity, takes my brain out of work completely and puts me into a relaxed mode. Second thing I did was I moved my eating window. And I made my dinner prior to sleep. So I made sure that I was eating no later than 2 hours prior to my bedtime. That allowed my body time to digest and allowed me to get into a place where I wasn't having the food digestion and or just, body temperature and things like that raised to a point where it was preventing me to sleep. So I did that. I also made sure that I was well hydrated throughout the course of my day, and I stopped drinking and smashing too much water too close to bedtime. So I was no longer getting up and peeing throughout the course of the night. Those are my first two really big things. The next thing I did was I actually made my bedroom this amazing haven for sleep. I no longer did anything else in my bedroom other than sleep and fun time with Christos. That's the only thing that room gets used for, right? I do not go in there during the day and lay or do anything. I do not take my computer in there. I do not take an iPad in there. I do not do anything that I probably used to do before. So that is now only allocated to that. I also have a little lamp now that I use that, again, is a better light. I flick that on, go into my room, turn everything else off, so that essentially the first thing I'm doing is dimming it, mooting it. I jump into bed, and the last thing that I do, which before I even get to the bedroom to do this, I would have also done probably a little bit of journaling, written out the things from the day, process what's been, shut the tabs in my, tab windows down, close them down before going to bed, where then I could actually allow the brain to do what it's meant to do and go through the process of, resting, going to sleep, recalibrating, right? But I would get rid of the things that might have otherwise been playing on my mind, keeping my mind active and just closing the doors on things. I would journal out and set my tasks for the following day too, so that I didn't have anything, looming in my back of my mind going, I've got to do this tomorrow, I've got to do this tomorrow, I've got to do this tomorrow. I already had a plan. I reflected and set the goals and closed the tabs from the day before. I set and planned for the day ahead, and I knew what I was going to do, and I felt, prepared. Those were the two big things for me around quietening the brain at night. The environmental things seriously helped. The food and the water things seriously helped. And then the last little thing was I pick a book. I have a book at the side of my bed, and I will physically read a book. So no screens, no nothing. And I read, and it just puts my brain, now my brain associates bedtime, that room, that lighting, and that book with sleep. And before you know it, I'm deep sleeping, and I'm in bed at the perfect time to hit the perfect cycle of time to hit my deep sleep, to maximize upon trying to get as many of those 90-minute cycles of sleep with as much deep as I can between 10 and 2 a.m. where it's most restorative. And then again, I try to hit, enough of the REM sleep in the latter part of the window of night, because that's usually what happens. It's the first part of the night where you get your, your deep sleep. So sleep traditionally is divided into two categories. You got your non-rapid eye movement, so NREM, and then your rapid eye movement, REM. They're both exactly what they sound like. One has, the eyes moving rapidly beneath the lids, and the other is not. And basically, these two types of sleep make up a single cycle where your brain will progress sequentially through each stage of the sleep. So you have your wake moment, then you go into your light sleep where you can be woken up relatively easily, right? It's the moments right before sleep. Then you have your deep sleep, where it's pretty hard to wake you. Like, you really don't stir much, muscles are relaxed, everything's relaxed and switched off. Then you go into your REM, and that's where you've got that rapid eye movement. Your brain has got a whole bunch of functions going on. At that point in time, respiration increases, heart rate increases, temperature regulation is switched off, brain activity is high. This is where we're vividly dreaming. But it's also where the brain's like categorically filing stuff from the day and making sense of and linking that subconscious to conscious. It's pretty awesome. So this is the stuff now when I understand all of this, I'm like, wow, I was really ripping myself off. Like I was shitting the bed. I was missing out on the deep restorative sleep that was growing me. I was missing out on the stuff that actually, mobilizes all of my brain activity and creates that, blueprint of filing. Like I was missing out on all of these things. So for everyone listening to this, they're equally important. NREM and REM, equally important. And there's actually been some studies and some research have shown that the importance of REM sleep is actually slightly higher than NREM. So when we go back to your ladies, Steph, that want to go, oh, I'm going to cut my sleep off and just get up early and go to the gym. Yeah, well, maybe don't. Maybe get a couple more cycles of your REM when you're getting your best sleep. You need to be getting it, right? So we should be going through these 4 stages of sleep in that 90-minute cycle if it's on track for doing its proper thing. So if you ever look at your sleep data, it goes like this. It's like this literal roller coaster ride of sleep stages, right? You should get at least 4 to 5 of them in a night. So if you're looking at your data on your Fitbit or your Garmin or your Apple or your Aura, and you're not getting those beautiful curvy roller coaster trajections of peaks and troughs, if there's not at least 4 of them, you're undersleeping. You should be getting 4 to 5.
And that's so true. And then going even back into tying in, Allie, with you, you were hitting it there with the deep REM sleep. And this is crucial for muscle growth. Tying back in for everybody that's really working so hard in the gym, and and this just applies not maybe just because you're lacking sleep, but you're wondering why you're maybe not seeing the results or gaining as much muscle mass. You are going to obviously be having more muscle mass when you sleep because there's more protein synthesis that occurs during sleep, as well as our release of human growth hormone that's naturally released during our sleep. This is actually something that's going to help muscle growth. So if you're not sleeping, you're not going to be growing. That's actually my best thing that I can recommend to anybody on this call today, is more of sleeping at the deep REM level, like you said, Allie. Like if you're not monitoring it, that's fine. Just make sure that you're at least getting an adequate amount of time. So 7 to 9 hours is a great time frame for you to kind of aim for. I think I know that's a little far stretch for some. I understand like maybe the 9 is not doable for everybody, but if you're at least trying to get at least 7 hours, get that 7 at least on the lower spectrum, you're probably going to hit maybe 4 of those deep REM cycles, hopefully.
100%. And look, that's where it's the most, you get the most restorative. Like Steph is so right. This is actually where, muscle growth, repair, but also it's the waste removal of toxins in your brain, which is what actually has you feeling, refreshed and energetic and actually, cognitively functioning well. So during deep sleep, you can expect to see, your blood pressure drop, blood flow will increase through to the muscles. So you actually get that heightened level of repair. You release your human growth hormone during your deep sleep. So again, who doesn't want to release more natural growth hormone? No one. So you got to be hitting your deep sleep. You actually have these long, slow brain waves during that cycle too, which is where the brain is actually flushing out waste. So important.
Oh my gosh, yes. The toxins being released. So
yeah.
crucial.
And keep going.
No. And so like with the tying in of like fatigue or like even like what we were talking about, your brain feeling foggy, you're not releasing these toxins and you're not letting your brain even decompress. Really, this is the only time that it can actually get the best functioning for your brain, for especially if you're demanded for your job. You're really high paced with cognitive function, like you are just having to think your whole day. You definitely need sleep. If you're lacking sleep, you're probably going to notice everything tanks as the day goes 100%. On, or if not in the morning. Caffeine is probably your best friend, and that's what keeps you up and alive. And if you're noticing these tendencies because you wake up and you're already searching like for a long espresso, like not even just a shot, like a long you're definitely going to be suffering in the adrenal side. Okay, so your adrenal glands are going to start actually being suppressed because of so much caffeine in your system is going to downregulate again your sleep. It really is going to affect your sleep pattern, your sleep hygiene. It's really important for you to monitor how much caffeine you're having in the day. I know this isn't about caffeine, but if you're actually having over 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, you are exceeding the amount of caffeine that you should be having in a day. So when you're obviously intaking so much caffeine, this is going to really affect your sleeping pattern, your sleep hygiene. I think so many people that lack sleep search for caffeine as their best friend. You know, we're searching for coffee or your Bang drink or, you know, that Celsius or whatever it is that your energy drink is that you know, is your go-to, or your pre-workout for your training, you know, just because you're so tired or you're just like not really pumped. It's probably the fact that you haven't slept enough, given the fact that we are maybe a little tired with work if it's a workout at the end of the day. But if you're doing this earlier on and you're still tired and you're having that much caffeine, I think that the regulation for caffeine is really very simple. If you're having over 400 milligrams of caffeine in a day, you are really over intaking your caffeine. You should definitely monitor how much caffeine you're intaking. If this is something that is starting to affect maybe your sleep pattern, or you're noticing that you can't stay asleep throughout the night. This is normally one of the things that I can immediately tell in a client if they can't sleep well. I can tell they had caffeine past like 6 p.m. in the evening, or maybe like 9 p.m. because they thought it was cool to take pre-workout in their evening workout, you know, and then they can't go to bed, and then they're like, oh, I don't know why I couldn't sleep or why I can't stay asleep. Look at your caffeine intake. Okay. So make sure you are monitoring or cutting it off at a certain time of the day, or monitoring how much you are having in your daily intake. Your adrenal glands do suffer, you know, we're starting to, you know, have too much caffeine, because this is something that I think we don't really pay attention to, and we think that we are like superhuman and that we're not going to get affected. So make sure you are paying attention to that.
Yeah, 100%. And look, if you don't need any more reason other than the fact that you're going to lose out on amazing gains,
right,
chronic sleep is actually linked to obesity, diabetes, a whole bunch of chronic diseases that come because the body's not actually getting the reprieve that it needs, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that lead to excessive weight gain when you're actually chronically deprived. So there are a number of reasons why we can put on weight during sleep. And the first one is that we don't actually get enough sleep. We actually have an increased appetite, and it's not always controllable. The things we talked about in the episode that we did with Kayla about the increase in certain hormones that basically increase your hunger levels, make satiation incredibly difficult, and you can end up eating, on average, the stats say, an extra 500 calories a day just because you're tired. How full on is that? Like, that's nuts. And a metabolic rate also decreases. So because you're not restoring, because you're not recharging, because you're not flushing toxins, metabolic rate decreases as much as 15%, meaning not only are we feeling hungry and potentially eating more, we're burning calories much slower. Wow. Like, this is what I mean. Once you start learning about the importance of sleep, you go, okay, I'm going to make sleep a thing, a real ritual, a real priority. Yep. The other thing is that exercise significantly helps your ability to sleep. Like, it's a mood changer, we know, absolutely, but it actually does increase your ability to sleep and to get into restorative sleep. Now, if you're not exercising, that can also impact sleep. So I would be suggesting to anyone that is experiencing it, look at your movement. Has it slowed down? Should you be increasing it? And make sure that the two go hand in hand, because you should be feeling like, and that's why Steph says, you know, even though she's at this point close to stage, she's feeling freaking tired. She's sleeping really well because she's moving like a demon. She's, you know, training like a beast still. So these are really relevant links here.
And I notice a huge difference, Ali, whenever I'm not training, you know, obviously maybe couple times a day, or trying to create a deficit, or trying to, you know, obviously get closer to stage, then my sleep actually starts getting thrown off, which is when I noticed for me, particularly when COVID happened and we kind of got, you know, pulled back from prepping a few times, you know, I started noticing how my sleep schedules and my sleep pattern was just irregular, and I couldn't really fall asleep. And that's kind of where I noticed my cortisol was just really unmanaged, and I couldn't really control it. And that's when I started supplementing in the ashwagandha and the calm. And I think that was a big tool to help me, even though maybe my exercise was not as strenuous or causing maybe me to be so tired to be going to bed. I still was able to, you know, kind of know why. It was because my exercise wasn't as hard, or maybe I had more days off, and on those days off, I would struggle going to bed, which is of reasons why, again, I was started trying to counter, because when you know, you'll make an effort. When you know that we're teaching you and that we're talking about and we're just informing you, you are going to make a difference when you're just up there mindlessly scrolling on Instagram at 3 a.m. because you can't sleep. Instead, you're going to say, oh my God, I should definitely, prioritize sleep. And this is the time I'd be able to be in my deep REM sleep. I can
100%.
being on YouTube or, watching endless, Netflix series over and over again. Like, just stop binge watching and prioritize your sleep. You really have to. It's just as much as your reading and your meals. People don't get it.
100%. So, and look, I think we should probably caveat it by saying, like, everybody's different. Every age cycle is different too. Like, children need a lot more, I think right up through till we get to sort of middle age and elderly, you still need at least 7 to 9. Actually, kids need sort of 9+. But getting into those brackets is really healthy. But how do you find out if your sleep is impaired or what perhaps is going on with you? If you've never looked at it before, I would be suggesting to start a little bit of a sleep journal for the next week and start looking at recording the time you go to sleep, the time you're waking up. Start noting if you've got the ability to look at a graph, like we talked about. Fitbit has it, Apple has it, like all these different, mechanisms that you can wear have them. Look at your sleep cycle and it will show you your phases. So are you awake progressively? Is there a lot of restlessness? Are you awake for periods of time? If so, how long? What is the percentage of sleep you're getting in REM versus light versus deep? Start looking at that and then examining the hours that you sleep night to night and then your natural wake time too. Because if you're finding that you're not capable of waking on average around the same time and there's discrepancies, that's usually a sign that you need more sleep too. When you get to the point you're getting enough, Steph talked about it at the start, it's that natural circadian rhythm. You get into the flow and everything is sort of processing and moving along really nicely. You're in this rhythm, you'll find your body naturally shutting down at a certain time with regularity, and it's naturally waking within the hour of consistency. So that's always a good sign.
It's so nice. I think people actually get that. They're like, oh, I already have that. Like, you have a good sleep rhythm as well as circadian rhythm that you follow, whether you have rituals because you have work that requires you to wake up at a certain time and you obviously are getting adequate amount of sleep and you go to sleep at a good time. And, obviously you notice you wake up. Like, that's, and that you may not even need your alarm. Those that have that obviously have it to a T. Like, they're good, like they're doing things well. But if you're not and you're struggling to stay up, you're struggling to even, and this happens, I think, more for like the shift workers, like doctors, nurses, people that work overnight. They have to create such a different obviously routine and rhythm to their body, and sometimes they have to fight it because they have days off, and then they have to work 3 days in a row. So I understand it's very difficult for those type of workers, but it's mainly more trying to prioritize the sleep in general. So don't overstress on the circadian rhythm so much as much as the sleep itself. But if you naturally, like, I still need an alarm. Okay. Like, I still definitely need an alarm to wake up. So
me too. I'm not gonna lie. I'm the same.
I'm not going to wake up. I'm not saying that there's not days that I just naturally do wake up. That is an alertness. Like, you have that alertness right when you wake up and you're like ready to go. That's honestly the best feeling, but I still obviously work with more of a scheduling side of thing. And I think that an actual time management is going to fall down with your sleep schedule too. If you don't have good time management and you're not putting yourself going to bed at a certain time or have a wake time that you have to be up by, then you're going to just kind of be all over the place.
I agree. So I think some really great take-home tips that we've discussed today are watching the level of stimulants you're having at the time of the day that you're having it, making sure that you're starting to get, the things you can naturally do to set circadian rhythms, which is seeing sunlight first thing in the morning, seeing it again towards the afternoon. In the waning light, it starts to release your natural melatonin. So these are all little hacks. But on top of that, reducing the time frame that you eat. Don't eat so late at night. Move it down lower. Have your fluid intake. Stop drinking fluid a couple of hours out. Setting up your bedroom so you've got more of a sleep hygiene and a sleep environment, right? There are other little hacks like running water apparently statistically has some sort of impact on the brain's mechanism to shut down. Having, scents and oils like the doTERRA and having, your easy air and your lavender and, essential oils that can also stimulate the body's slowing down mechanism. Going through a nighttime meditation, perhaps in your ear, your AirPods, not watching anything because we're staying away from blue light. Exactly. I think also doing things that might become a consistent routine. So when the body then starts to recognize reading a book, going to this space, sitting in that chair, like whatever it is, it starts to become a familiarity and association to the sleep and the unwind process. And then I think lastly, looking where you can, even if you are someone who's what we call a night owl and they don't go to sleep till later, at least maybe just try to move it back, move it forward. So come to sleep a little earlier, even if it's by an hour or two, you're still picking up an extra hour of that deep restorative sleep window, which happens in the earlier part of the night, because it doesn't matter even if you go to bed at 2 a.m. and you wake up and you've had 9 hours. At the 2 a.m. mark, you've missed the deep sleep window. It is between that 10 and 2. Well, you've missed a lot of it. You won't get as much. So you don't want to miss that.
Period. Right.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Throughout the night. So if you are a night owl, like you're actually, touching, I think it's actually important.
Because there are.
It's more about setting still a schedule. Like, I think it's still coming down to scheduling. It blows my mind how many people are like, oh, I just, maybe around this time, between this and this, like it's something you should already know what time is the time you're actually going to bed and what time you should be up. This is going to keep you on actual schedule, and you're going to be able to then prioritize when you are actually not getting maybe deep REM sleep. But first and foremost is making the time. Okay. It's making the time. So many people just put it on the back burner. So don't be one of those. Prioritize it. If you need some supplementation and melatonin doesn't work for you because it didn't work for me, Revive has some amazing products. So you could even use code Dynasty at any time and get, some percentages off there and just really start prioritizing your sleep, because I'm telling you, they work. It works. It worked miracles for me. I take it year round. And touching to what Ali said about like a ritual at night, doing even some like not just meditating. I think meditating also ties into like your yoga or even like doing some mobility work. I think was fantastic for the decompression side. You actually feel release of the muscles, release of your joints and tendons when you're doing some foam rolling or you're doing some mobility work. And it allows you to just go straight into bed a little less tight, which allows your muscles to be more relaxed, which is something during your sleep. In one of the stages, you actually start actually having more relaxation in the muscle, which allows the muscle to recover, repair, and grow. Yes. Sleep.
All right, people. So as if you don't need any more excuse to focus on that bedroom in the positive way of sleep, I think now we've given it to you. But I'm hoping that there's plenty of take-home tips. I hope you got a lot out of this because, if there's one thing that I can't stress enough, sleep is a key pillar of health. And it's 100%, I think, the tool in the arsenal kit of the very best at the competitive levels, because anyone you speak to that's at the very top, we all prioritize sleep and recovery. It's right up there with good nutrition. I mean, you can't avoid it.
Nope. And supplementation there, guys, is just something that is in addition. It's not something that is, you can definitely try to get it through foods, but if your calories or your range doesn't allow it, then go ahead and go with the option of an all natural form. You don't have to rely on over-the-counter medicine. I'm a non-believer on, prescription medicine or having to rely on something. Yeah. So something all natural. And that is the reason why, trying to resource something if you need it. If not, just build that schedule, really build a routine around, of course, your work. And of course, things can get a little crazy and hectic, but still prioritize yourself when you're prioritizing sleep, as well as your training and meals the way you do.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Thanks everyone for listening. I'll see you guys next episode. Yeah. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Queen Divas, Queens of Fitness podcast. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Queen Divas Pod, on Twitter at Queen Divas 4, and follow our hosts on Instagram, Alicia at Alicia Gowans_WBFF Pro, and Steph at Stephanie Ayala 7. See you all next week.